She had spent her entire fortune to buy a mansion, even installed a chandelier her mother had always dreamed of, all in the hope of being called family. But every hope shattered the moment she opened the message. "Don't come. I don't want you here." That night she cried. Her tears fell onto the expensive silk scarf she had bought for her younger sister, but only once. And the next morning, those who had cast her aside finally realized. They were no longer facing the family's walking wallet, but the most terrifying nightmare of all, Olivia.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Olivia. I'm 41 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. They say success is the ultimate revenge. But what they don't say, what they never tell you, is that it's also the most elaborate disguise for loneliness. The night I closed the biggest deal of my career, I stood alone in a penthouse suite that could have been mistaken for a gallery. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors that gleamed like ice, and silence so perfect it felt aggressive. My name had just appeared in the Wall Street Journal. My net worth had crossed into territory only old money heirs usually lived in. And yet I'd never felt more disposable. I still had my heels on, arms folded, eyes fixed on the horizon where the skyline blinked like 1,000 artificial stars. Somewhere below, the world was buzzing, dinners being served, glasses clinking, couples bickering about where to order dessert. Up here, it was just me. The powerhouse wife, the visionary CEO, the woman who bought everyone's comfort but couldn't buy her place in her own home. I reached for my phone. I didn't expect much. Derek hadn't asked about the deal all week, but I still checked. Some pathetic part of me hoped he'd surprise me. There was a message from Derek. My heart flinched, stupidly, involuntarily. Then I read it. "You don't need to come tonight. Mom doesn't want you here." Just like that. No, sorry. No, maybe next time. No, I love you. My hand slackened. The phone slipped through my fingers and hit the floor with a hollow clatter. I stared at it for a few seconds, maybe hoping it would disappear, that if I picked it up, it would say something else, something less cruel. But the message didn't change. I picked the phone up slowly, like it was something toxic. My nails dug into my palm so hard it left marks. Still, I typed back. "Understood, darling." I set the phone down on the table, carefully, as if any sudden movement might make the ache in my chest explode into something loud. I swallowed the scream forming in my throat. Not tonight. I'd already cried over this family too many times. I crossed the room, letting the chill from the glass windows meet my skin. Outside, the city sparkled with warmth I hadn't felt in years. I could see families gathered around dinner tables, people laughing on balconies, couples walking arm in arm under golden street lamps. And here I was, CEO, powerhouse, provider, uninvited, not wanted, not even by the man who said, "I do." My mind wandered back to the beginning. The early days. Derek was charming then, sweet, driven, effortlessly magnetic. He'd call me brilliant, tell me I was too good for the world. But the moment I married him, the moment his mother re-entered our lives like a queen returning to court, everything shifted. Evelyn never liked me. She didn't even hide it. "Oh, Olivia, you work so hard. I'm sure one day you'll find time for a family," she once said, smiling as if it were a compliment. She was always like that, ice wrapped in satin. She never shouted, never insulted me outright. She just made sure I knew I was never quite enough of the right things. Not warm enough, not nurturing enough, not soft enough. And definitely not family. But she didn't mind the checks. I'd bought her a villa in Key West, paid off her medical bills, hired designers for her new kitchen, down to the imported backsplash tiles she couldn't possibly live without. She never once said thank you. And Derek? He never defended me, not once. "She's just traditional," he'd say. "Don't take it personally. She'll come around." She didn't. But I kept trying. Because when you're raised to believe your worth is proven through what you give, you keep giving. Even when it empties you. I let them mold me into what they wanted. Quiet, generous, accommodating. I thought if I kept playing the part, eventually they'd let me in. That maybe one day I'd belong. But tonight's message, that was the truth. I'd bought them everything, and still, I was nothing. I moved through the penthouse slowly, like it wasn't mine. The 12-seat dining table had never hosted a holiday. The guest bedrooms had never held family. Even my bed felt like something I kept made for a husband who rarely came home before midnight, and never touched me when he did. This wasn't a home. It was a showroom, a perfect cage lined with gold. I wandered into the small corner I kept untouched by decorators. Just a velvet chair, a few books, and a photo of me at 26. In that picture, I was smiling, really smiling, like the world hadn't yet taught me the weight of performance. I sat in the chair and stared at her, at me. That girl hadn't built empires yet, but she had something I'd lost: hope. I whispered to her, "Was this really what you wanted? Is this the empire you imagined?" She didn't answer, of course, just stared back, frozen in time, full of dreams and unaware of the cages waiting for her. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the silence press into me like a weighted blanket. I thought about Evelyn's voice, about Derek's silence, about the dinner party I wouldn't be attending, and for the first time, not in sadness but in clarity, I felt something crack. Not a breakdown, not yet, just the start of a fracture. A hairline split in the perfect mask I'd worn for years. A voice inside me whispered, "They were never going to love you. They were going to use you until there was nothing left." And another voice, one I hadn't heard in a long time, my own, whispered something even softer. "You deserve more." I opened my eyes. The city still shimmered below. The skyline unchanged, but inside me, something had shifted. Small, yes, but real. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I simply stood, walked back to the glass wall, and stared at my reflection. Sharp, composed, hollow. "You don't need to come tonight," I murmured aloud, repeating Derek's words. Then, softly, "No, you never wanted me to come. You just wanted me to pay." And suddenly I realized I wasn't heartbroken. I was waking up. This was the moment I stopped pretending. The moment I stopped calling this love. The moment I began to see the cage for what it was. Beautiful, impressive, but still a prison. They didn't kick me out. They freed me. And soon I'd return the favor. 3 months before the message that broke me, I stood at the edge of a decision I told myself was love. I still remember how Derek looked that morning. Hair wet from the shower, sleeves rolled, hands gripping his coffee mug like it was the only thing grounding him. "She needs help, Liv," he said. "She can't live in that old apartment anymore. Her knees are getting worse, and she won't say it, but she's in pain." I stirred my espresso slowly, watching the crema spiral into the dark. "Then let's get her a place," I said. "Somewhere nice, accessible, peaceful." He blinked, surprised by how quickly I agreed. "You'd really do that?" I didn't answer right away. I just nodded and said, "She's your mother." But deep down, that wasn't why I did it. Truth? I thought maybe this was the moment, the one where Evelyn would finally look at me with something resembling acceptance, where she'd stop pretending I was just the wallet her son happened to marry. I didn't need love from her. But maybe, just maybe, I could earn respect. So I bought the house, a modern Spanish villa just outside Coral Gables. White stone, arched windows, wraparound patio, the kind of place that made neighbors crane their necks. It was beautiful and expensive. I didn't blink at the price. I wired the down payment within hours. I told myself this was family, this was marriage, this was what commitment looked like. But that fantasy shattered 2 days later with a single phone call. "Olivia," Evelyn's voice rang crisp through the speaker. "The marble they used for the master bath. It's awful. Feels like a hospital." I blinked. "We used Carrara from the Italian supplier. You chose it. Well, clearly you weren't paying attention. I'm going to need you to fly down next week so we can fix this. I have a board meeting on Tuesday. Then reschedule it." That wasn't a request. That was a command dressed in entitlement. I hesitated. Then, like always, I caved. Because some foolish part of me still believed that if I sacrificed enough, she'd soften. If I just swallowed a little more pride, I could finally belong. So I got on the plane, sat through 4 hours of tile samples, smiled while she criticized every finish like I hadn't spent weeks curating the design. And at the end of it all, she looked at me and said, with that signature mix of venom and velvet, "You know, Olivia, you're very efficient. Cold, but efficient." I froze, the Grout catalog still open in my lap. She continued, sipping tea like we were discussing weather. "Some women just weren't meant for nurturing, I suppose. But I'm sure you're good at what you do. You always were more of a corporate type." I stared at her. She didn't flinch, just kept flipping through a catalog, as if she hadn't just carved me into pieces and rearranged them into something she could stomach. I wanted to walk out. I wanted to throw the tiles across the room. But instead, I said, "As long as Derek's happy, I'll do whatever it takes." And that, right there, was the sentence that kept me in chains. That was my mantra, my curse, my invisible leash. As long as Derek's happy. Because deep down, I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for him. I kept hoping he'd notice the hours I poured into his mother's comfort. That he'd see the way I let her spit barbs at me and never fired back. That he'd pull me into his arms one night and whisper, "Thank you for loving my mother even when she makes it hard." But that night never came. What did come were invoices. More upgrades, more complaints, more silence. Every few days something new would show up. Custom French curtains, hand-blown glass chandeliers, antique armoires she didn't remember ordering but somehow expected me to pay for. I became the silent ATM, swipe, approve, disappear. Still, I kept reaching out, kept trying. 1 week before the housewarming party, I found a silk scarf, hand-dyed, soft as breath. The colors reminded me of her garden, the only thing she seemed to love unconditionally. I had it wrapped with care, tied with gold ribbon. A peace offering, an olive branch, something human. I showed up at her old apartment to deliver it in person. She opened the door halfway, her expression tense, guarded. "I thought I'd bring this by," I said, holding out the box. "For your new home." She took the box with hesitation, opened it, stared at the scarf like it was an insult. Then she stepped back and, with a flick of her wrist, tossed it onto the floor between us. "I don't wear things like that," she said. "You should know that by now." Then she shut the door. I stood there for a full minute, long enough for the elevator at the end of the hall to ding and open and close again. Finally, I bent down, picked up the scarf, and walked away. That night, I told Derek everything, every word, every humiliation. He didn't look up from his phone. "She's just under stress," he said. "The move's overwhelming." "Derek," I whispered. "She threw it at me," he sighed. "Don't take it personally. That's how she is. Just keep things smooth until after the party, okay? Please. Just keep things smooth." I nodded, because that's what I did. I kept things smooth. Even when I was bleeding under the surface. Even when every step deeper into that house felt like erasing more of myself. Even when I realized the truth. They didn't want me there. They just wanted what I could provide. Still, I said yes. Still, I paid the next invoice. Still, I smiled through the shame. Because back then, I still thought love meant endurance. That loyalty meant silence. That sacrifice would be rewarded. I didn't know yet that the price of acceptance was myself. But I would soon. Very soon. By the time the housewarming party approached, I had stopped checking the receipts. The invoices came like clockwork. Emailed directly from Evelyn's assistant, or worse, forwarded without comment from Derek. No pleasantries, no questions, just amounts. Long lists of final touches that never seemed to end. I'd stopped reading the itemizations. There was no point. Everything from custom chandeliers to antique doorknobs to a pair of marble urns imported from Verona. I just wired the money. At that point, I wasn't even hoping for gratitude anymore. Gratitude would have been a luxury. All I wanted, pathetically, was acknowledgement. A nod, a thank you text, even if copied and pasted. But all I ever got was silence, or worse, more demands. The new house became a black hole, devouring time, money, energy, and dignity. It wasn't a gift anymore. It was a transaction on a loop. I told myself this was just the final push, that once the party was over, everything would settle, Evelyn would settle, Derek would see the extent of what I'd done. Maybe then, just then, I could stop being the outsider. I didn't realize I was already outside, locked out, paying for the roof over their heads while they built a life I was never invited to share. 1 week before the party, I decided to do something different, something small but personal, human. It wasn't an act of desperation, not at first. I just wanted to show a gesture, something that said, I'm still trying. I'd found the scarf months ago in Milan, in a boutique down an alley I only stumbled into after getting lost between meetings. It was silk, light, hand-painted, in colors that reminded me of Evelyn's favorite orchids, deep green and soft lilac. I remember thinking it was elegant, understated, something she might actually love if only she let herself. I didn't buy it then, but now, with the party coming and my heart growing quieter by the day, I called the shop and had it overnighted. I had it wrapped in tissue and placed in a white box, tied with a thin gold ribbon. I slipped a note inside. Only 5 words. For your new beginning. Olivia, I didn't send a driver. I went myself. Evelyn's old apartment building still smelled like mothballs and cleaning bleach. When I knocked on her door, she opened it just enough to let me see the guarded look in her eyes. I brought you something, I said gently, holding the box out like it might explode. She took it slowly, opened the lid, pulled the scarf out. She held it up between 2 fingers like it was a used napkin. I don't wear things like this, she said, flatly. Then she let it fall to the floor. Just like that. No comment on the craftsmanship, no regard for the gesture. Just a flick of dismissal. I bent to pick it up, my face burning, but I didn't say a word. I stood, held it back to my chest, and waited for anything, any sign that she'd soften, apologize, even shift. Uncomfortably, she didn't. She stepped back into her apartment and closed the door. No goodbye, no thank you. Not even a pause. That door didn't slam. It clicked shut like the final period on a sentence I should have read a long time ago. I stood in the hallway longer than I should have, staring at the number on her door, my hands trembling, the scarf still folded in my fist. And yet, part of me still held on to hope, still believed Derek would understand. That night, I told him everything. I expected him to be shocked, angry on my behalf, but instead, he just kept scrolling on his phone. She probably didn't mean it, he muttered. Derek, she threw it on the floor. He looked up finally, annoyed. She's stressed. The move, the contractors. Come on, Liv, don't make this about you. My mouth went dry. It was about me. For once, I made it about me. I gave her something, not out of duty, not as a transaction, but as a person. She's my mother, he said. She's never going to change. But what about you, I whispered. Are you ever going to change? He blinked, surprised. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been paying for everything, for this house, this party, her renovations, her everything. And all I get in return is silence from you and open contempt from her. He exhaled loudly, tossed his phone onto the couch. This again? Olivia, we've talked about this. You're making things worse by overreacting. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or throw something, but I didn't. I just nodded. Fine, I'll make sure the final invoices are paid. I'll keep things smooth, like you always want. He didn't even thank me. He just said, that'd be great. I should have walked away then. I should have stopped, but I didn't, because I had one last hope left. One last coin to throw into the well, the party, I told myself. Once they see the final result, the flowers, the lighting, the catering, the live music, once they step into the home I created for them, they'll know. They'll understand what I've done for them. And maybe then, I'll be more than just the checkbook. So I signed off on everything. The floral installations alone cost more than my first year's salary when I started in finance. Champagne imported from Reims. A custom-designed garden archway for the welcome area. A team of valet staff flown in from a 5-star hotel in Miami. Even the serving trays were handcrafted. I approved it all, quietly, without question. One last time. And yet, in the quiet of my penthouse, where no one ever asked how I was, I felt something crack a little deeper. Because even as I kept giving, I already knew. They would never give anything back. And someday soon, even I would stop pretending to care. There's a moment in every woman's life when silence becomes the loudest sound she'll ever hear. Mine came wrapped in whispers. It was the night before the party. The house I had poured millions into was finally finished, polished down to the last imported lamp. My inbox was flooded with final confirmations. Catering, valet, seating chart, temperature-controlled wine storage. Evelyn's dream had been realized, all under my name, all with my money, and I wasn't invited. Not officially, not even indirectly, not even out of pity. Still, part of me hoped. Maybe Derek would come home and say, "Come with me." Maybe Evelyn would extend a last-minute olive branch, bitter as it might be. I told myself again that this was family. Messy, flawed, but family. So when I couldn't sleep that night, I told myself I was just restless, not broken, not waiting, just awake. I wandered into the hallway, barefoot, half awake. The kitchen light was still on. I figured Derek must have left it before heading to bed. But as I passed the office door, slightly ajar, I heard it. His voice, soft, urgent, different. I paused. Then I heard my name. No, not my name. She just wired the balance. My heart stuttered. I leaned closer to the door frame, breath quiet, muscles tight. My name wasn't said, but I knew it was about me. There was no one else. "Yes, Mom, the money's in. The last transfer cleared. Everything's set." My throat went dry. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She thinks it's all for her." A pause, then a low laugh. "Yeah, it's perfect. After tomorrow, we're finally done." That word, done. I felt it like a knife at the base of my spine. Done? Done with what? With me? My body didn't move. I just stood there, one hand gripping the wall, the other pressed to my chest like I could slow down the panic with sheer pressure. He kept talking, lower now, his voice a conspirator's whisper. Smooth, practiced, calculated. I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. I turned and walked back down the hallway in complete silence. Not a single tear, not a single curse, no dramatic gasp or scream. Just the quiet horror of realization blooming inside me. They were working together, my husband, his mother, planning behind my back, using me, playing me, and the worst part? They weren't even subtle about it anymore, because they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I couldn't notice. I was the walking wallet, the faceless funder, the woman too desperate for love to question the terms of her own captivity. But something about hearing it, spoken, changed everything. It made it real. I walked into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. The city was glowing outside the window, but I couldn't see it. Everything looked fogged over. Not from tears, I hadn't cried. I was too numb to cry. I just sat, letting the weight of it all press down. How many lies had I swallowed? How many nights had I paid for their peace? How many pieces of myself had I carved away to fit inside a mold someone else made? I thought back to every moment that should have made me suspicious. The odd silences, the weird timing of transactions, the way Derek always redirected conversations when money came up, how Evelyn had suddenly become involved in the financial decisions, even though she had zero income of her own. I'd ignored all of it, because love makes you stupid, because hope is addictive, because I had spent so long trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. And now I just overheard the confirmation. I wasn't just unloved, I was a mark. I stood up slowly, walked to my bedroom, and sat at the vanity. Looked at my own reflection like it belonged to someone else. I looked flawless, of course. Skin smooth, hair swept back, eyes sharp. But the woman staring back at me was not okay. She was unraveling. She was awakening. I opened the closet and found the dress. That dress. The rose gold gown. The one I had chosen for the party. The one I imagined myself wearing when I walked into the courtyard, owning the night. I'd envisioned people turning their heads, whispering, "That's her. That's the woman who made all this happen." I ran my fingers along the sequins, and suddenly the vision felt like a joke. What was I planning to do? Show up like an uninvited donor at her own funeral? Because that's what this was. They had buried me, quietly, elegantly, and now they were throwing a party to celebrate. But the thing about ghosts? Sometimes they come back. I hung the dress on the closet door and sat on the edge of the bed, spine straight, fists clenched. I had given them everything, my time, my effort, my money, my silence. And this is what they did with it. Plotted, whispered, smirked behind closed doors. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to destroy something. But I wasn't. What I felt was colder than rage. It was clarity. There was no fixing this. There was no redemption arc. There would be no heartfelt apology, no turnaround moment. No, we're sorry, we see you now. There would be consequences. Not because I was cruel, but because I was done. I stood and looked at myself again, truly looked. And for the first time in a long time, I saw it. The outline of the woman I used to be, and the shadow of the woman I was about to become. I whispered to the empty room, "So this is how it ends." Then I smirked. "No, this is how it begins." I always thought betrayal would come in screams, slamming doors, shattering glass, final words flung like knives. But mine arrived in silence, not a storm, a stillness, a message. The same message. "You don't need to come tonight. Mom doesn't want you here." 7 words, delivered like a business memo, flat, final, practiced. I stared at it for a full minute, maybe longer. The screen glowed against my fingertips. I'd been preparing for this party for weeks, no, months, planning, paying, watching the bills climb like vines around my throat. And now, with everything in place, the marble polished, the lights hung, the champagne chilling, they told me not to come. Again. They didn't even pretend to soften it this time. Not sorry, darling. Not, it's just complicated. Just, you're not wanted here. But here's the thing. This time, I didn't flinch. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't crumble. I didn't feel that cold stab in my chest that usually followed every rejection. I felt light. Like the gravity I'd been carrying around had quietly slipped off my shoulders. I stood up from the bed and walked to the closet. There it was. The dress, my armor, my illusion, rose gold, floor length, hand-sewn sequins. I had picked it out in Paris, flown it home in its own garment bag, tried it on 3 times in secret, imagining the look on Evelyn's face when I walked into the garden that night. I had imagined her speechless. Now I knew better. The dress wasn't a key to the party. It was a monument to self-delusion. Proof that I still believed, somewhere deep down, that beauty could buy me a seat at their table. But their table had never been mine. I'd only ever paid for the flowers. I took the dress off the hanger, slowly, slipped it over my shoulders. It still fit like a second skin. Perfect. Expensive. Cold. I walked to the mirror and stared. I looked like a woman who belonged on the cover of Harper's Bazaar. But behind the perfect makeup, behind the smoky eyes and sculpted cheekbones, was someone I barely recognized anymore. Someone who had paid over and over for the illusion of inclusion. And finally saw it for what it was. I sat down at the vanity. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look. I knew it wasn't an apology. Instead, I opened the top drawer and pulled out a velvet box. Inside were the earrings Derek gave me 2 years ago. Sapphire studs. His makeup gift after his mother called me frigid at a Christmas dinner, and he said nothing. I held one in my hand, then put them back. I didn't want his silence hanging from my ears. I stood, walked barefoot across the penthouse and into the study, my space, my sanctuary. I opened the safe. Inside were their strings, tangled and invisible. Every credit card Evelyn had ever used. Every account Derek ever forgot to transfer to his name. Their world built on my signature, my credit, my silence. I laid them out on the desk. Black Amex, corporate Visa, luxury bank cards from institutions they couldn't pronounce but bragged about to their friends. Cards in my name, benefits for their comfort. I stared at them, then reached for the scissors. One by one, I cut them down the middle. I didn't rush, I didn't hesitate. Each snip was a sentence. I'm not your provider. I'm not your punching bag. I'm not your fool. The last one, Evelyn's Concierge Platinum, I cut twice. Then I swept the pieces into a silver bowl and set them aside like ashes. But I wasn't done. I picked up the phone. First, I called my banker. I need to freeze the final 3.5 million transfer, immediately. Yes, flag it as fraudulent exposure. Yes, I'll sign whatever you need. Second, my real estate attorney. Hold the title release. There's an active dispute now. I'll send documentation tonight. Do not release possession. Third, my security team. Pull all access for Derek and Evelyn. Garage tags, elevator codes, private entry. I want full lockdown by 8 p.m. Each call was like a switch flipping, and with every instruction, I felt something loosen inside me. This wasn't rage. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. A woman doesn't become free when someone opens the door. She becomes free when she realizes the door was never locked. I walked back to the window, barefoot, the city flickering beneath me like a promise. I set the phone down. My reflection in the glass looked different. No longer hungry, no longer waiting, and finally honest. I glanced back at the rose gold dress still hugging my frame, still stunning, and in that moment, I realized something simple and devastating. I never needed the dress. I never needed the house, the table, the invitation. I only ever needed to give myself permission to stop proving, to stop chasing, to stop buying my own rejection. I slipped the dress off gently and hung it back where it belonged, not as a weapon, not as a statement, but as a relic, a farewell. Then I stepped into a black silk blouse, tailored trousers, no makeup, hair pulled into a knot, power, plain and real. I sat at my desk once more and drafted the final email of the day. Simple, calm, clean. To Derek. Message received. I won't be coming, and neither will the money. I pressed send. No punctuation, no closing line, no apology. They threw a party to celebrate cutting me out, but I had just returned the favor, quietly, elegantly, completely. And when the music stopped and the bills rolled in, and Evelyn's face turned red in front of her precious guests, she'd know. The party was never hers. It was mine, funded by me, designed by me, and shut down by me. Power doesn't always come with a roar. Sometimes it arrives with the cold snap of plastic between two blades of steel. That morning, I didn't wake up afraid. I didn't wake up sad. I woke up surgical. Everything inside me felt precise, sharp, not angry, but utterly clear. It was like someone had wiped the fog from every window in my mind. And for the first time in years, I could see them, see myself, see the game I'd been playing, blindfolded, willingly. I walked into the study barefoot. The silence in the penthouse was delicious. Not the kind of silence that feels lonely, but the kind that makes you feel untouchable, alone, yes, but no longer abandoned. I opened the safe behind the abstract painting Derek always hated. He said it made the room feel cold, fitting. Inside was everything they had ever used to build their illusion of independence. Black cards, gold cards, cards linked to corporate accounts they didn't manage, concierge services I paid for, lifestyle they never earned. They used them like oxygen. And now I was taking away the air. I laid them all on the desk, fan-shaped, methodical. 27 cards in total. Then I reached for the scissors and cut the first one. The sound was final, not dramatic, not cinematic, just decisive. Snip. There went Evelyn's private spa fund. Snip. The corporate card Derek used to impress clients at restaurants I was never invited to. Snip, snip, snip. One after another until the desk was littered with fragments, clean lines through counterfeit entitlement. I didn't even blink, because this wasn't anger. This was administration. This was me managing the budget of my own dignity. When I finished, I placed the broken pieces into a crystal bowl. I didn't throw them away, not yet. I wanted to see them, keep them, not as souvenirs of suffering, but as symbols of sovereignty. Then came the calls. First, the bank. Yes, this is Olivia Thorne. I'd like to freeze a pending transfer, $3.5 million to a Florida escrow account. File it under internal fraud pending dispute, and flag all recent charges on Evelyn K. Thorne and Derek T. Thorne's linked cards. I'll provide legal documentation shortly. The banker stuttered slightly, but she knew better than to question me. Yes, Miss Thorne, we'll process that immediately. Second, the real estate attorney. There's to be no handover of the Coral Gables property. Place a legal hold on the transaction. I'm disputing the disbursement of final funds and requesting return of all keys pending litigation. He paused, then spoke carefully. Is this a personal or corporate matter? It's both, I said, and I suggest you act quickly. I've already frozen the money. Third, my private security director, effective now. Revoke all access privileges for Derek and Evelyn Thorne. Garage, elevator, service entries, everything. Wipe their biometric access. New codes only for vetted staff. Notify me when the sweep is complete. A beat of hesitation. May I ask why? Because they no longer live here, I said, and I no longer live for them. It was the most honest sentence I had spoken in a decade. I ended the call, stood from my chair, and walked to the balcony. The view from the penthouse had never looked clearer. Sunlight poured over the glass towers of downtown Miami. Boats cut clean lines through Biscayne Bay. Life continued, careless and loud, below me. But up here, a quiet revolution was underway. They thought I would collapse, that I would sulk in silence, lick wounds behind velvet curtains. They thought they could uninvite me from their charade, and I would keep funding the performance. But I had just done what no one thought I could do. I had pulled the plug, quietly, elegantly, entirely, and the beauty of it was, they didn't even know yet. In a few hours, the cracks would begin. Evelyn's card would decline when she ordered last-minute catering upgrades. The florist would call when the final balance wasn't cleared. The valet service would hesitate when no one responded to their access check. And when Derek tried to pay the band, he'd be told the account was frozen, that no one authorized payment, and he'd look around the party, confused. Realization dawning, slow and sour. And somewhere in that moment, maybe when a guest asked where I was, maybe when Evelyn tried to order wine and got denied, they'd feel it. The silence. My silence. I didn't need to show up at the party. I already had. I was in every rose petal scattered across the garden, every imported chandelier Evelyn insisted on. Every damn tile I paid to reorder because she didn't like the tone of beige. They would celebrate over my work, without me. But I had taken the thing they never understood I held all along. Control. Not just financial, emotional. Narrative control, boundary control, self-control. I walked back inside, slowly, deliberately. Went into the closet, slid the rose gold dress into a garment bag. Not because I'd wear it again, but because I'd keep it, as a relic. A dress meant for applause that ended up marking the night I stopped needing it. I chose a black silk blouse. High collar, no jewelry. Hair pulled back tight, clean, unapologetic. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman they used to manipulate. I saw her, the one I used to be, the one they tried to erase, the one who had learned to stand still so others could shine. She was back, and she didn't need forgiveness. She needed a file folder, a court order, and a locked gate. I walked to the desk, opened my laptop, and drafted the final email of the day. To Derek. Subject. No response needed. Derek, I received your message. I won't be attending. All financial ties between us, personal and professional, are now severed. Legal paperwork is underway. Do not attempt to reverse this. Do not come here. Do not call. This is not a warning. This is a record. Olivia, I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then hit send. And just like that, I was no longer someone's wife, someone's daughter-in-law, someone's donor. I was Olivia Thorne, CEO, survivor, and for the first time, sovereign. I didn't need to be there to bring the house down. In fact, that was the point. Let them have their party. Let them bask in the illusion one last time before reality snapped it in half like dry porcelain. I stayed home, not out of weakness, but by design, because some storms don't announce themselves. They just arrive, rearranging everything in their path. From what I heard and later watched, it was exquisite. The house glowed like a set from a luxury lifestyle shoot. Candles flickered along the manicured garden walkways. The fountain burbled politely. The staff moved like synchronized dancers in white gloves and tailored black. Evelyn was resplendent, pearl choker, silk shawl, her hair teased into a crown of quiet triumph. Derek stood beside her, tux crisp, smile rehearsed. They greeted guests like kings and queens of a kingdom they hadn't built. Every inch of that house reeked of money. My money, the marble Evelyn claimed she personally picked. I sourced it from Italy, the floral archway she boasted about. I flew the florist in from Vancouver. The champagne bar Derek grinned beside. I wrote that check with one eye closed and both fists clenched. They told everyone it was their dream come true. And maybe it was, until the dream turned on them. It began small, like all great collapses do. Around 7:42 p.m., the head caterer discreetly approached Derek. He leaned in, whispered something. Derek stiffened, nodded, pulled out a sleek black card from his inner pocket. Declined. He tried again, declined. Try this one, he muttered, handing over another card Evelyn had used countless times without question. Declined. The caterer didn't argue, just stood there, waiting. No drama, just quiet logistics. Until Derek said, a little too loud, there must be a system issue. Try later. The chef nodded, but his face said something else. He walked away, straight into the kitchen, and told his staff to stop plating. At 7:56 p.m., the valet stand got a call from a delivery service. A final order of specialty desserts Evelyn had ordered off the record. Payment was due on arrival. The card on file declined. By 8:05 p.m., the sommelier, who was supposed to uncork a rare vertical selection of Burgundy reds, received word that his invoice hadn't cleared either, and at 8:10 p.m., the string quartet, sitting quietly under the pergola, got the final confirmation from their manager. Pull out. No payment. So they did, mid-song. Guests looked up as the music simply stopped. At first it was barely noticeable, a murmur, a shift in the air, but the silence after elegance is louder than chaos. People began to frown, look around, whisper. Evelyn's smile froze on her lips like it had been shellacked into place. Derek kept adjusting his cufflinks, checking his phone, probably praying that I would respond to his calls. I didn't, because I had seen it all from my screen. The security feed gave me everything I needed. 4 cameras, multiple angles. The courtyard, the front gate, the kitchen, the valet station. I watched them from my penthouse, wrapped in a throw blanket, glass of wine in hand. Not smugly, not gleefully, just certain. This was not revenge. This was truth correcting itself. And the truth was, they were never the hosts. They were tenants. Of my generosity, of my silence. And the lease had expired. At 8:27 p.m., a courier arrived at the front entrance with a thick, white envelope. Legal stationery, signed by me, stamped by my attorney. A formal notice of property dispute and title freeze. He handed it to Evelyn, in full view of her guests. The garden went still. The kind of still that makes people inch backward without realizing it. The kind of still that turns admiration into confusion. Derek snatched the envelope from her hand, flipped through the pages. His jaw moved, but no words came out. And Evelyn, for the first time in the 15 years I'd known her, she looked small. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the envelope on the bar. No announcement, no rebuttal, just a slow, involuntary shrinking. Guests began murmuring. A few quietly exited. Others gathered in tight clusters, pretending not to gossip while gossiping loudly. The chef emerged from the kitchen to speak with the event coordinator. The staff removed the uncorked bottles of champagne. Glasses stopped refilling. The music didn't resume. The illusion unraveled at every seam. And still, no one said my name. But I was there. In the chandeliers, Evelyn pretended to choose. In the imported tiles, Derek claimed he paid for. In the silence that followed the question. So, who's actually paying for all this? By 9:15 p.m., Evelyn attempted a smile and said, just a little confusion, nothing to worry about. But it was too late. Perception doesn't need facts. It just needs a crack. And I had given them one the size of a canyon. Guests began leaving, slowly at first, then faster, like a flood gaining speed. Evelyn's garden emptied. The lighting system, also under my account, automatically shut off at 9:30 p.m. sharp. They stood in dim light, her heels wobbling slightly on the gravel. Derek pacing, phone glued to his ear, trying desperately to call a woman who no longer existed. The Olivia who would answer, the Olivia who would fix it, the Olivia who still cared. But I was gone. Not geographically, existentially. By 9:45 p.m., the villa was quiet. No laughter, no music, no wine. Just Evelyn and Derek, standing in their borrowed empire, abandoned by the very people they tried to impress. I leaned back in my chair, watching them on the screen. Not with vengeance, not with malice, with liberation. They had thrown a party without me, but every guest left remembering me. Not because I showed up, because I made it happen. And then I made it stop. Shame doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly, like mold in silk. You don't notice it at first, until it stains everything. After the party collapsed, I didn't hear from Derek or Evelyn for 3 days. Not a text, not a knock. Just silence. It was almost disappointing. And then, on the 4th day, it began. It was 6:12 p.m. when I got the first alert from building security. Unauthorized access attempt. Front penthouse elevator. I didn't need to look. I already knew. I tapped into the camera feed anyway. Curiosity, not concern. There they were. Derek, in a wrinkled blazer that no longer fit the way it used to. Evelyn, clutching her handbag like it might fly away if she loosened her grip. Both of them standing in the private elevator lobby, pressing the call button again and again, as if repetition might override reality. But it didn't. Access denied. I watched them stare at the locked doors like lost children. Then Derek pulled out his phone, probably trying to call building management, or me. He wouldn't get through, not to them, not to me, not anymore. Eventually, security came, calmly, respectfully. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, your access has been permanently revoked. Miss Thorne has issued standing orders. I saw Derek's mouth move. Arguing, demanding. His voice rose. Evelyn stayed silent. She just looked hollow. 5 minutes later, they were escorted out. No drama, no screams, just 2 people who no longer belonged to the world they thought they owned. I could have ended it there, but fate, as always, had better timing than I did. That night, a news item popped up in one of the private business newsletters I subscribed to. Socialite Evelyn Thorne's gala ends in legal dispute. Real estate title contested by benefactor CEO Olivia Thorne. Someone had leaked the documents, not me. But I wasn't sorry. By morning, whispers turned into headlines. By afternoon, it made the local evening news. And by evening, someone had posted a video, Evelyn receiving the legal notice at the party, with that frozen expression of disbelief on her face. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. By then, the ripple had become a wave. Calls started flooding Derek's office. Investors wanted answers. Journalists circled like vultures. A board meeting was called, one he wasn't invited to. The company name? Still legally mine. The accounts? Still under review. The villa? Frozen. He couldn't sell it, couldn't live in it, couldn't even step onto the property without violating a court order. So where did they go? To Sarasota, back to the dusty condo they thought they'd left behind forever. The place Derek used to call a relic. The one Evelyn once described as claustrophobic and tragic. And now, it was home. Security footage from the Sarasota building, yes, I still had access, showed them arriving with 2 suitcases and a borrowed SUV. No fanfare, no luggage service, no doorman offering flutes of Prosecco. Just cracked pavement and the sharp flicker of overhead fluorescence. I watched them enter, dragging their own bags. No assistants, no drivers, no concierge. Just the sound of wheels scraping pavement and pride being swallowed. Inside, the condo looked smaller than they remembered. Time hadn't been kind to it. The blinds were bent. The kitchen faucet still dripped. Evelyn opened a drawer and found an expired grocery coupon from years ago. A relic of the life they tried to erase. The stripped dignity didn't come all at once. It came in layers, one missed phone call, one declined card, one eviction from privilege. By day 7, Derek tried calling my lawyer. He wanted a conversation. There would be none. By day 10, Evelyn left a voicemail. I missed the old version of you. I deleted it. Because the old version she missed was the one who paid and obeyed and hoped for love that would never come. By day 12, they showed up again, this time at my building. Not in the lobby, at the front gate, behind the security post like uninvited guests at a country club. They buzzed and buzzed and buzzed. I watched on the feed. Derek spoke into the mic, tone casual, desperate for normalcy. "Liv, it's me. Just want to talk. Can we come up?" Behind him, Evelyn stood quiet, sunglasses on despite the shade. Her shoulders stooped, hair undone. She wasn't a villain anymore. She was just old, tired, unmoored. I stared at the screen, not with hate, not with glee, with distance. It felt like watching ghosts knock on a door that no longer existed. I picked up the mic, pressed the speak button once. Access denied. Then I turned off the feed. They stayed at the gate for 42 minutes, then left. Later that evening, the concierge mentioned they had asked if I was home, if maybe I had just forgotten to authorize them. He shook his head. They didn't look like themselves, he said. They looked like people who had lost their compass. I nodded, said nothing, just walked back to the elevator and pressed PH. That night, I sat by the window, city lights glittering beneath me. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and breathed, not heavily, not with triumph, with clarity. They weren't suffering because I punished them. They were suffering because they had built a life on a foundation that never belonged to them. And I had finally reclaimed it. Not just the money, not just the property. Me, my voice, my boundaries, my peace. There's a myth that when women walk away from toxicity, they must burn everything down. Rage, fire, fury. But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is lock the door and walk upstairs. And this time, I didn't look back. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They beg to be let in again. It had been 16 days since the fallout at the gates. I thought that would be the end, final, clean, like a slammed door. But ghosts rarely take the hint. They linger. And on the 17th morning, they returned. Only this time, Evelyn collapsed. The call came from Peter, my head of security. His voice was calm, professional, but beneath it was a slight tremor. "Ms. Thorne, Derek and his mother are at the front." Evelyn fainted. We called the paramedics, but she refused treatment. She's sitting now. Derek is asking, no, begging, to speak with you. Begging. I hadn't heard that word associated with Derek in ever. I looked at the camera feed. Evelyn sat on the marble bench beneath the awning, head bent, fingers shaking. Derek hovered beside her, pacing. His once polished shoes scuffed, shirt unbuttoned too low, hair flat and tired. They looked like war refugees returning to a country they once ruled. Part of me wanted to say no, let them stew in their own consequences. But another part, the woman I had become, knew closure wasn't silence. Let them up 10 minutes, no more. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. They stepped inside like prisoners waiting for judgment. Derek carried nothing, not even pride. Evelyn, draped in a dull beige coat, clutched her purse like it was a shield. Her eyes met mine briefly, but this time, they didn't search for weakness. They simply braced for the weight of truth. "Olivia," Evelyn began, her voice as dry as dust. "I owe you an apology." I said nothing. "I misjudged you. That's too soft a word. I punished you, for years, for being everything I wasn't. Strong, self-made, resilient. I saw you as a threat when really, you were the only one who ever tried to keep this family from collapsing." Her hands trembled. Her fingers picked at the edges of her scarf. "I don't expect your forgiveness, but I couldn't live with myself without looking you in the eye and saying, I was wrong." It felt surreal. The woman who once called me barren, soulless, undeserving of her son, now looked like a child confessing to a broken vase. Derek remained standing, his eyes fixed on the floor. Then finally he spoke. "I was weak." I arched a brow. "You always saw it. I knew that. But I hid behind her, behind my job, behind the comfort you built for us. And when you started realizing your worth, I panicked. I tried to keep you in place by pretending to lead, but I was always following your light and pretending it was mine." He paused. "I let her shame you for not being a mother, when truthfully, you were more of a caregiver than either of us deserved. It should have hurt. It should have cracked me open like it once did. But it didn't. Not anymore. I stepped away from them, walked to the table, and retrieved a manila folder. I laid it between us. The divorce papers, signed by me. You just need to finish it. He picked it up slowly. The weight of it in his hands was heavier than the truth he'd tried to avoid. So this is it. No, Derek, I said. This was it months ago. You just kept showing up late to your own ending. He closed the folder but didn't put it down. Evelyn stared at the fireplace, her eyes empty. You built all this, she whispered, almost to herself. And we tried to convince the world you didn't belong in it. You tried to convince me first, I said. The world was just a bonus. I walked toward Derek. You didn't lose a wife, Derek. You lost your free ride. You lost the one person who believed in you when even you couldn't fake believing in yourself. I know, he said quietly. And now, Evelyn asked, what do we do now? You leave, you let me be. You figure out who you are when you're not draining someone else to survive. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind, the heavy, absolute kind. They moved toward the elevator. Each step sounded like surrender. As they reached the door, Evelyn turned, not to speak, not to beg, just to look at me one last time, and I let her. The elevator closed. The apartment was still again, but this time, the stillness wasn't hollow. It was holy. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out an old album. Wedding photos, engagement dinners, vacations we took just to pretend we were happy. I tore out one page. The photo of us, Derek in his tux, me in a dress that cost more than a year of rent. Evelyn beside us, her smile tight, performative. I fed it to the fire. It curled, blackened, disappeared. I whispered, that was never real, but this piece is. I poured a glass of water, not wine, not champagne, just water, cold, pure. I sat on the balcony, barefoot, legs tucked under me, watching the city breathe. I was alone, but not lonely. No more waiting by the phone. No more questioning my worth. No more giving oxygen to people who only knew how to suffocate. I was finally, completely, beautifully alone with myself. And I had never been more full. I didn't cry, I didn't toast. I just whispered, I forgive myself for waiting so long to walk away. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I didn't slam the door behind them. I let it close, softly, finally, forever. Exactly 1 year had passed. 12 months since I shut the door behind them, softly, finally. Since then, silence had become a symphony, solitude a sanctuary. And today, I stood not as a woman recovering from betrayal, but as a woman reborn in the ashes of it. The air smelled of paint, fresh-cut grass, and beginnings. The sun shimmered on the polished walkways of the housing village that now bore my name. What once was an abandoned stretch of concrete and broken dreams was now a vibrant, living community. 8 buildings, 32 homes, safe, clean, built with purpose, built with love. The Olivia Thorne Foundation wasn't just carved into the marble plaque at the entrance. It was imprinted into the laughter of children playing with water balloons, the aroma of shared food from the community kitchen, the shy hope in the eyes of women who had finally escaped what they once thought was forever. For years, I built palaces for people who never planned to stay, I had told my team during the groundbreaking. Today, I build homes for people who never thought they deserved one. The ceremony began with a modest string quartet. No luxury brand sponsors, no press vultures, just real people, real stories, and my name not as decoration, but as promise. I stood on the small wooden stage beneath the archway, wind tugging lightly at my ivory linen dress. A breeze kissed my face, and in that moment I realized I had never breathed so freely. I took the microphone. The crowd fell silent, not with fear, but with familiarity. They knew me, maybe not by history, but by heart. 1 year ago, I began, voice steady. I lived in a penthouse with 20-foot ceilings and a view of the entire city. I had wealth. I had power. I had silence. But I was starving for meaning. Pause. A few nods, a few wet eyes. You see, the most dangerous kind of loneliness isn't when you're alone. It's when you're surrounded by people who make you feel invisible. I was the ATM, the convenience, the outsider trying to buy her way in. And no matter how many millions I gave, the door never opened. Murmurs of recognition rose from the crowd. So I stopped knocking. I stopped begging. I stopped bleeding for people who called it generosity but treated it like duty. And when I walked away, I thought I was losing everything, but I was just clearing space. For this. I gestured to the homes behind me. Pastel-painted front doors, window boxes with new flowers, little handprints on sidewalk corners, names on mailboxes, wind chimes singing above porches. I no longer spend money trying to be loved. I invested into love that doesn't need to be bought. This place, these homes, are proof that freedom is not a destination. It's a decision. Applause swelled. Not thunderous, but warm, honest. The kind that touches bone. As I stepped down from the stage, a little girl with braids and a beaming smile ran up to me. She held something in her hand, a folded drawing made with crayons. "Miss Olivia," she said, breathless. "This is our house, me and Mommy's." I knelt, opened the paper. There it was, a home drawn in pink and yellow, with curtains, a garden, and above it all, a big red heart that almost didn't fit on the page. "Do you like it?" she asked. "Sweetheart, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever received." I held her tightly, the kind of hug that rewires something inside you. That tells you you're not alone anymore. After the event, I walked the perimeter of the neighborhood, watching residents settle into their porches, planting basil, stringing up wind chimes. A teen couple painted a mural on the side of the community center, a phoenix rising over a skyline. Nearby, I saw Miss Teresa, a retired librarian, teaching a young mother how to trim roses. Across the way, 3 teens played music with handmade instruments. No one asked me for anything. They just smiled, waved, lived. Inside the community hall, I slipped into a quiet room with a small wall-mounted TV. The local news channel was covering the grand opening. I sipped my coffee, thinking nothing of it, until the screen cut to a segment about local food insecurity. And there they were, Derek and Evelyn, standing in line at a donation center, their faces drawn, clothes ill-fitted. Derek stared ahead, eyes blank. Evelyn clutched a paper bag to her chest. No jewels, no pretense. Just people reduced to survival. I stood still, my breath caught. And then I let it out. There was no spike of satisfaction, no victorious thrill, only clarity. This was karma, not the flashy, theatrical kind, but the silent kind, the kind that doesn't need a spotlight because it moves through shadows and rebalances the scales anyway. They had drained me, undermined me, abandoned me, but they had never broken me. And that was the difference. I walked back outside, the drawing still in my hand, the sun warming my back. Children laughed by the community pool. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The wind carried the scent of grilled corn. I had no mansion now, but I had something richer, something deeper. A palace with no gates, no hierarchy, no price tag. Just love, just dignity, just freedom. They tried to lock me out of a mansion, I whispered to no one. And then I looked around at the homes, the gardens, the murals still in progress. But I found something better. I smiled, truly, deeply. A palace called freedom. She once thought forgiveness was a gift meant for others, but it turned out to be the final gift she gave herself. When she let go of the pain and closed the doors that had deliberately slammed in her face. There was no applause, no curtain falling, only a woman stepping out of gilded chains and choosing freedom as her path. Sometimes the answer isn't about reclaiming what we've lost, but about building what never existed. A place, a life, a home, where no one has to trade their dignity to be loved. If you have ever been Olivia, or have known an Olivia in your life, leave something for her in the comments. It doesn't have to be long, just honest.